Okay, Trustee Good, everything is started. The recording has begun. You might be muted at this time.
I'm waiting for exactly 2 o'clock. Thank you for reminding me that I was muted. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, not quite. I've got one computer says 2 o'clock, one says 1:59. I'll wait until they both say at least 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order this meeting of the Lone Star College System Policy Review Committee meeting, and I designate the Office of General Counsel as the secretary for today's meeting. Before we delve into the substance of our meeting, I'd like to confirm that we have a quorum. Trustee Stoma, are you on?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Thank you so much. And Trustee Kane, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. Trustee Kane, would you lead us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Helen, would you certify posting of the notice of the meeting?
Chair Good, I certify that the meeting was posted in accordance with the law.
Great, thank you. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
No, nobody has signed up today.
Okay, then we'll just move right on along. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the May 7th meeting of the Policy Review Committee. Do I have a motion?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving these minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 20th meeting?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the minutes for the May 20th meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are also adopted. Okay, this brings us to policy considerations, section A. We have 5 proposals brought to us by Trustee Pierce. Does anyone, I have a suggestion. These items are very similar, and I don't know, gentlemen, if you would prefer to deal with them individually or as a group.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I think I would rather deal with these individually than as a group. I've got, certainly have some questions for Chief Operating Officer Mario Castillo, which will apply to all of them, but I think we should look at them individually.
Trustee Kane?
I'm fine either way.
Okay, then let's just handle them one at a time. The first item on the agenda, action item number 1. Is it necessary that I read the recommendation? I guess it wouldn't hurt. Vice chancellors and other administrative positions must follow the same posting and filling of vacancies in the LSC system hiring process to ensure fair and impartial recruitment and selection of qualified employees, no exceptions. This is in accordance with applicable state and federal laws, rules, and policy. Do I have a motion to adopt this recommendation, which would constitute moving a vote to move it forward in the policy review process? That's the purpose of today's consideration. This is our initial screening. So,
Madam Chair,
yes,
I have a point of information. I'd
okay.
like to essentially ask Mario Castillo, who's the Chief Operating Officer for the district, several questions, if you don't mind, to clarify the proposals here.
Okay, so just as a point of response to your general question, okay? It's my understanding under the rules, Robert's rules, we can't really entertain an exchange of questions and information with Office of General Counsel until there's a motion on the table to open this up for discussion. So it seems to me that we might be kind of stuck if what we need is to be able to ask General Counsel some questions before anyone moves to support moving this recommendation through the process.
Well, in my opinion, there needs to be a discussion because these are not totally black and white. You know, if I were to move for anything, it would be for a full board discussion of each of these.
I see.
I'd rather have clarification, you know, before we make a vote. If I'm, you know, forced to make a vote one way or the other, I will. But I think in how should I say, ferreting out what the right thing to do is here, we should take input from the administration.
Oh,
But at any rate, that's my opinion on it.
your point is well taken. I'm going to ask General Counsel to provide some guidance on whether or not we can ask him any questions of a general nature on committee action item number 1 before any member of the committee moves to support moving it through the process. Mario?
Yes, ma'am. And so I think sort of consistent with my legal opinion the last time we met together, the rules are essentially what the committee wants the rules to be, except where the board in plenary section has limited the committee. So in other words, if a majority of you would like to have that discussion, we can have it right now before taking up each item.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it sounds to me like Trustee Stoma certainly would like to have that conversation. Trustee Kane?
Yes, I would be in favor of any discussion we might have that would shed light on any question that any one of us has.
Okay, I fully support that. So Trustee Stoma, please move forward with your questions for General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Mario, just 3 questions, and I'll ask them for each one of these. One, what is the current policy in regards to, and then the specific action item 1, how in contrast is the proposed change? You know, what's the difference? And 2, if the proposed change were adopted, what would be the impact on college operations? Those are the 3 questions I have for each of these.
Yes, sir. So I'm probably going to need you to remind me at one point. So let me start with the first one, right? So the first one is found, it's in section 4.A.1 and it's hiring practices. It's on page 97 of the policy manual. If you're looking at the PDF, that's the entire manual. And so essentially that's the hiring employees section. And that policy was passed back in, I believe it's May of 2016. And it actually has 3 sections that talk about the hiring practices, and it divides non-faculty positions, faculty positions, and then administrative positions. If I understand Trustee Pierce's recommendation, it is to amend either, there's 2 ways to do it. You could either amend 4.A.1c and say that what applies to college administrators essentially will apply to all administrators. Or you could amend section A and say, particularly just do away with section A and say non-faculty position searches will be governed by the same rules as either faculty searches, which is subsection B, and then, or section C. So that's the page that we would have to redline to further Trustee Pierce's proposal 1. And I think that was your first question.
Yeah, remind me what the difference is between a college administrator and an administrator.
Right. So if you look at, again, it's section C, and I'm just going to read straight from the policy. It says college administrator positions exhaustively include, solely for the purposes of this subsection, deans, vice presidents, and the college's president. And one thing that I will highlight to you that is a nuance that we keep track of in the Office of the General Counsel, but the average reader probably does not, is that lowercase college always means a member college. Uppercase college means the system, right? And so college administrator, as used in that section, is lowercase, which means it's an administrator at the member colleges. And so that's your vice president of instruction, your vice president of administrative services at most colleges, and your vice president of student services, and then the deans.
Thank you. So what's the impact if we adopt this?
The impact will be that we will no longer be able to direct appoint administrators at the vice chancellor level. And so, for example, several cabinet members right now were directly appointed from Dr. Head. If Trustee Pierce's proposal moves forward, as I understand her proposal to be, and I will not speak for her because she's here and I'm sure she could speak for herself. If I understand the proposal, what it would do is it would eliminate the option for the chancellor or a designee to direct appoint anyone, and everyone would have to go through a search at that level. And so what I understand about action item 1 is that action item 1 is about vice chancellors and other sort of administrators at that level. A similar item, which is action item 4, if I remember correctly, is you must post all jobs. And so that's the difference between 1 and 4, and that would be the impact, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Trustee Stone, Trustee Kane, I'm sorry.
you know, I know there are a lot of ways to go about looking at these issues, but it seems to me that one of the things that I would recommend be done, whether it's coming from administration, whether it's coming from a board member, whether it's coming from a faculty member, a member of the general public. And this is something I touched on at our last meeting, is that anytime we get a recommendation for a policy change, I really think that the first time it comes to us, if it's a recommendation for a policy change, I really think it needs to be a red line version. And let me tell you why I say that. I looked through all 5 of Trustee Pierce's proposals, and I compared them to section 4.A.1 items A through F. It seems to me that it would be so much more clear if, in this instance, looking at these 5, if Trustee Pierce had simply taken policy 4.A and done a red line version of how she would recommend it look in light of the 5 proposals that she has submitted. And then there would be no confusion about the wording that she is recommending. And I would say the same thing for any policy that comes from administration or anyone else. Because otherwise, if we, for example, today, we can only guess at how the red line version that she wants might look like. And so that's why I really think it would behoove us to go about things that way. And then there's no confusion about what it is that a person wants us to look at and debate.
And Trustee Kane, thank you so much for that. Oh, Trustee Stelma, am I talking over you? I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, ma'am.
No.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything. I think, you know, I'm actually in concurrence with trustee Kane. So go ahead, go right ahead.
Okay, it was my understanding, and I believe the minutes reflect, that we decided, as part of our procedures, that policy recommendations coming from other than LSC administration would come to us first for an initial screening, and then would go, if they pass the screening, would then go to the CFO to assist the proponent in developing fiscal impact. And at that point, the red line would be developed, just because that would reduce the burden on proponents unless we felt there was enough merit to move forward. So what I'm hearing is a suggestion that we alter our rules in a way that would actually remove the first screening step and go to a two-step process, unless what we're going to do is suggest that at the screening, proponents at least provide us with a red line, and only if it passes that does it go for fiscal impact.
Madam
And-
Chair,
Yes.
point of clarification then, you help me, I'm asking. So is our vote on this be to move forward with the redlining, I guess we would call it, the second step from this point? Would that be, and not so much approval to go to the full board for approval? I mean, what's our decision point?
Yes.
Under the current rules?
Under the current rules, today we would decide whether or not to advance the proposal to the second step, which would be fiscal impact and development of the red line.
Okay, that makes sense. And that would be my recommendation on all 5 of these.
And Madam Chair,
Yes,
I fully understand what we discussed in the past. And I certainly will be fine with continuing the process that was outlined before. It's just that, to me, it's so much simpler to just require the person who wants to see a policy change to go through the policy, tell us what needs to be changed by a red line, what needs to be added by language, so that the first time we see it, we know exactly what is in that person's mind and intent. And to me, that just makes it so much more clear and gets right to the point.
Trustee Kane, I agree with you. The other issue here is what's the economic impact or the impact operations, which still requires a, how should I say, a second step to determine what those are. I mean, that's, to me, as a trustee, that's the key thing. I mean, how are these changes going to impact the business, the operations of the business?
Right.
And if it's a negative impact, we certainly, you know, want to think twice before approving anything. But I see either way, whether, you know, we are, how should I say, presented with the red lines first, as you suggest, which I have no issues with. It still has to go for impact analysis back to the administration. So, I mean, it's a two-step either way. It's a Texas two-step either way.
Right. My suggestion is not precluding a fiscal impact.
right.
Not at all. You know, because as you read through what Trustee Pierce has sent, there can be some ambiguity in
Yes.
what the intent of certain phrases are. Whereas if that were put in a red line version of existing policy with strike-throughs and her proposed wording, there would be no ambiguity.
Well, and as I'm sure both of you can appreciate, anytime you're launching a new process, the devil is always in the details. So we might very carefully set out what we want our rules and procedures to be. And then when we put it into action, we see where, well, maybe that isn't working quite as well as we thought it would. An issue that comes to my mind is that Trustee Pierce has relied on the procedures that we agreed to in previous meetings in bringing these forward. And so I don't think it would be fair to impose upon her now a requirement to do a red line before we consider it for screening. So I'm feeling a little stuck here on, you know, what we can and can't do.
No, you're spot on. We should do what we committed to do.
And
Yes.
I agree with that. I don't have a disagreement with that. I think as much as anything, I'm looking to the future.
Okay.
So I don't disagree that we set up the certain procedures that have been followed. But I guess my next question would be, given that, what we are taking on right now as an initial look is simply to open up discussion about this then?
What we're deciding today is whether the proposals should move forward in our consideration process. We're
Okay.
not yet saying nope, and we're not yet recommending that it go to the full board. Right now, we're considering whether or not to have Trustee Pierce and the CFO and whoever might be involved in helping her do fiscal impact and a red line version. I do certainly see the value of proponents providing a red line at the outset, because that does show that they have at least considered what's already in the policy manual before bringing forward proposed changes, and have carefully thought about how proposed changes interact with policies that are already in place.
Right. I agree.
Madam Chair, I think that under 5, it's incumbent upon ourselves, as you stated, to act under our current rules. Now, if at a later date or even at the end of this meeting, if we want to amend our rules to go forward, we could do that. But we have to, you know, how should I say, do what we say we'll do.
Right.
So.
Is there any other discussion preparatory to a motion to advance item number 1? Any more discussion that needs to be had?
Not I.
Then that sounded like Stoma.
Yep.
And
So
Trustee Kane, do you need any more preparatory clarification?
No, I don't need any more clarification.
I don't want to, you know, run over the top of anybody. Is there a motion to advance committee action item number 1?
so move.
Second? Is there a second? Hearing none, this item fails. All right, committee action item number 2. Trustee Stoma and Kane, do either of you need to have any preparatory discussion with general counsel?
My 3 questions to Mario are again, what's the current policy state? How does this contrast with current policy? And what's the impact to operations if this were adopted?
Yes, sir. So the current policy is found in Roman numeral 1G.1.06. It's under prohibited actions. It's on page 23 of the policy manual, and it reads as follows: the college and board do not employ trustees' close relatives, nor do they hire trustees' close relatives as independent contractors for personal services. The college may not employ a former trustee until the first anniversary of the date the trustee's membership on the board ends. And so if I understand Trustee Pierce's recommendation, it is that essentially the first part of that is still, the second part of that is still prohibited, but I believe that her recommended definition is direct relatives as opposed to close relatives. And so that's one of the changes that I've read in her recommendation. There's a difference between a direct relative and a close relative, and that's one of the changes. Otherwise, the policy already bars employment of trustees within that 1 year. Another difference seems to be that Trustee Pierce doesn't have a temporal limit on that, like the current policy does. In other words, in the current policy, a former trustee can become employed on day 366 by the administration. If I understand Trustee Pierce's recommendation is that there be no such time limitation on it. And I think that also explains what the impact would be.
Thank you.
Mario, is the 365-day limit something that the college system chosen, or does it have basis in some other legal authority?
If I remember correctly, and it's been a while since I looked at this one, Madam Chair, I believe it is a legal requirement. I believe it is statutory because I remember we have looked at this in the past, but I believe it is a legal requirement.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it actually is. It's Texas Education Code 130.089. Thank you to my staff. So it is once again, it is Texas Education. It's in the Texas Education Code.
Thank you. And if I understand you correctly, the policy that we have already limits hiring relatives to the second degree of affinity, is that right? And third degree of consanguinity?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, gentlemen, any other preparatory questions?
Not I.
Thank you. Is there a motion to advance this recommendation?
So move.
Is there a second? Is there a second to advance this recommendation? Hearing none, recommendation fails. Committee action item 3. Gentlemen, do either of you need or want to have any preparatory discussion with General Counsel?
Yes, it's Mike Stoma. Mario, same 3 questions. What's the current policy state? What's the
Yes, sir.
contrast between? And I can repeat them. It's up to you. I'm sure you remember them. So you can proceed if you remember them.
Let's see. Well, we'll see. We'll find out soon enough if I remember.
Okay.
Let me know. All right. So number 1, I think that the best way to incorporate this recommendation would probably be in section 3.d.1.3. And that's page 80 of the policy manual, and it's called transactions requiring board approval. Specifically, subsection A is employment contracts. Now, the way it works right now is once the board approves, or rather delegates to the chancellor the authority to enter into an employment contract, and we had some examples of that at the last board meetings with action item 29 and 30, then the chancellor can execute those contracts. And so from what I understand from Trustee Pierce's recommendation is that right now, once the board approves the contract sum, it is really delegated to the chancellor to negotiate the terms. And so long as Dr. Head or the chancellor doesn't exceed the sum authority authorized by the delegation from the Board of Trustees, he is free to change those terms. And some of those terms, for example, that I understand Trustee Pierce would like to not have so delegated are titles and assignments. So right now, Dr. Head has the authority to move someone, for example, from a president position to a vice chancellor position. Now, based on the conversation that we had earlier, he can't do it the other way. You cannot go from being a vice chancellor to being a president by direct appointment. And so from what I understand from Trustee Pierce's recommendation, the impact would be that she would like from now on, that once the board approves a particular contractual term, whether that is a title or a location, that anytime the chancellor wishes to change one of those terms, that he would have to come back to the board and get approval for those changes. And that is my understanding of the recommendation.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, do either of you have any other preparatory questions for general counsel? Is there a motion to advance this recommendation?
So move.
Second? Is there a second? Hearing none, the recommendation fails. Committee action item number 4. Trustee Stoma, I presume that you want to pose the same 3 questions to general counsel, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mario?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So again, I think this goes back to section 4.A.1 hiring practices. And my understanding of it is that action item 4 is one step further than action item 1, whereas action item 1 is saying vice chancellors and other high-level administrators, we should go ahead and post all those jobs. From what I understand from action item 4, it's let's post all jobs 100% of the time. And that is, so we would have to amend again, section 4.A.1, page 97. I've explained the impact, and I think that summarizes the questions, unless Trustee Stoma, you think I missed something, sir?
So currently, just from my understanding, currently, let's say an already approved vice chancellor position was open. Maybe it had been previously filled, or maybe it's never been filled, approved by the board but never filled. Then to fill that position, the chancellor does not have to go out to the public, does not have to post and recruit according to current policies. When I say current policy, that's not exactly correct, but he doesn't have to post it. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. He does not have to post that job.
Okay, thank you.
He doesn't have to post, okay, I'm sorry. As I read this recommendation, it's asking for a policy that requires all jobs, positions be posted.
Indeed, ma'am.
And so it seems to me that the change, if this is adopted, would only affect those positions that could be filled by direct appointment. Is that correct?
That would be a better question. That would be better directed at Trustee Pierce.
Okay.
But just from the literal reading of it, it says a policy requiring that all jobs or /postings, vacancies in the Lone Star College system, parenthetical, regardless of rank or category, and parenthetical, should be posted. But other than that, as to the intent, I would yield to Trustee Pierce.
Sure. That's certainly fair. Because this seems, I don't have a problem with all jobs have to be posted. Certainly would be good for all employees to be aware of opportunities as they arise. Lots of organizations follow a process whereby new or vacant positions are posted internally before they're posted externally and that kind of thing. So I'm having trouble reconciling this recommendation with recommendation number 1.
Madam Chair, I've got one more question.
Sure,
Counsel, if I
go
may.
ahead.
Mario, perhaps an example would be, here, I guess maybe a year and a half back, there was a vice chancellor position that was open. I think it had been filled at one time by someone, and I don't know who it was. And that the chancellor, upon his authority, approved a former board member for that position, and that member was hired. That's the condition, from what I understand, that this policy is aimed at, how should I say, modifying. Is that your understanding?
My understanding that fact scenario is better addressed by proposal action item number 1. To me, action item number 4 is broader than action item 1 because action item 1 specifically lists vice chancellors, and then in conjunction with action item 2, I believe it is, between the two of them, I think the point is to address that situation that you've referenced, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, do either of you need to ask any further preparatory questions?
That I.
All right, is there a motion to advance action item number 4?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Recommendation fails. Action item number 5. And Mario, I'm going to just go ahead and assume that Trustee Stoma wants to pose the same 3 questions to you with regard to action item number 5.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And again, we return to section 4.a, which would have to have a section in there making it very clear that this is essentially what I understand from Trustee Pierce. It is a nepotism. It's an anti-nepotism policy that would forbid the chancellor or other supervisors from hiring individual or to have control over a family member's employment, such as hiring, promotion, raises, and termination decisions. And ultimately, because the chancellor oversees everybody, there's no way in effect to park a relative of the chancellor's in a way that would not violate this proposed policy.
So does such a condition exist today, Mario?
It does, but it doesn't specifically address, so it does, and so we manage, so there's sort of 2 situations, right? There's somebody that is under a family member of the chancellor, which is one issue, and then you have a family member of another subordinate, right? And so usually the way we manage that is we move folks from one area. It's really, it falls under our ethics policy. And so usually that's where we would move someone, but with the chancellor, it's impossible because at the end of the day, everyone works for the chancellor.
How does that not a conflict of interest? How do you resolve that legally as not being a conflict of interest?
I think that's exactly the situation that Trustee Pierce is trying to address, is that tension via this proposal.
Has this situation ever been raised to the Texas Attorney General for an opinion?
No, sir, it has not.
That's my understanding too.
So Mario, as I read our existing nepotism policy, we already have restrictions that say a college employee cannot directly supervise any person related to within certain degrees. And it also says that a person related to a trustee can't be hired. There's this time, only employees who were hired more than 30 days before a trustee is appointed or more than 6 months before a trustee is elected can continue their employment or be employed. So there are already restrictions in place.
Yes, ma'am, to some extent, but I guess what I would say is that when it comes to the nepotism of trustee relatives, trustees don't hire anyone other than the chancellor. They don't promote anyone. They don't give raises on an individual basis, and they don't make termination decisions for anyone other than the chancellor.
Right.
So in that scenario, if a trustee was related to the chancellor, yes, ma'am, that's correct. Then the antecedent example you reference, again, the argument can be made that if, for example, a vice chancellor has a relative So long as that relative works for another vice chancellor, it satisfies that. The question, and again, I hazard to speak for Trustee Pierce because she's here ready, willing, and able to speak for herself. What I understand from Trustee Pierce is what happens when the chancellor has a relative, because arguably the chancellor does supervise every single employee.
Right.
In fact, Mario, doesn't the chancellor have hiring and firing authority over every employee in the system?
Indeed, sir, he does.
Thank you.
Right, yep.
And by the way, Mario, just one other question. I mean, as far as recommended salary increases, that's done by the chancellor. Is that correct?
To the board, yes, sir. All recommendations for salary increases come through the chancellor.
And is it true that the board approves not only all salary increases, but also improves initial contracts and renewal of contracts? Is that true?
I would say that, so the last two are correct. I would modify the first one to say that the board approves salary increases that are guaranteed by a contract. So in other words, if Dr. Head or a subordinate supervisor gives someone a salary increase that doesn't have a contract, that would not come to the board, sir. But if it involves a contract, then yes, sir, it would under the section I cited earlier.
Oh, well, that I agree. Thank you for that clarification. That gives more meaning to this, if you ask me. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any further preparatory questions?
None from me.
Trustee Kane,
None from me.
is there a motion to
So moved.
advance this? Okay,
So moved.
is there a second? Is there a second to advance this proposal? Hearing none, proposal failed. Action item number 6. Now, the next items for us to consider are items that have come to us through the administration. And at this point, we're being asked to recommend that they be posted for public comment. I believe we saw the red lines at our last meeting. Is that correct, Mario?
It is indeed, ma'am.
Okay, great. Are there any preparatory questions to action item number 6?
Not from me.
No.
All right, is there a motion to advance this action item?
So moved.
Second?
Second. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Oh, any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Action item 6 advances. Action item number 7. Gentlemen, is there any need or desire to ask preparatory questions?
Not aye.
Is
No.
there a motion to advance this item?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
second. Thank you, gentlemen. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion advances. Or recommendation, action item 7 advances. Action item 8. Gentlemen, any need to ask preparatory questions? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to advance this item?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Second, so I'm hearing a motion Kane, second Stoma, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, action item number 8 advances. Okay. Let's go back to Sorry, now I've got my pages out of order. I think the next item on the agenda is, oh, there it is, found it, sorry. Try to be smoother next time. Okay. The next item on the agenda is proposed subject policies currently posted for public notice and comment. Mario?
Yes, ma'am. We're still collecting feedback on those,
Okay,
and we're hoping to bring that feedback within 30 days of them having been posted. We posted them the Monday after the last PRC meeting.
okay. All right, so they're not right for further discussion.
Indeed, ma'am.
Great, thank you. There are no policies yet for us to consider advancing to the full board. Suggested future agenda items. Hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting
Ma'am,
at 2:44
Madam
p.m.
Chair?
Yes, yes.
I'm so sorry. I was waiting for, usually at the end, you've made a practice to ask if anyone has any questions.
No,
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
nope, nope.
And now
nope.
I'm that person, so I'm going to be quick. We just had two questions in the office of the general counsel, really three questions in light of today. Number one is, may a PRC member advance his or her own policy proposal? We would like to, maybe not for discussion necessarily today at the adjournment of the meeting, but as a suggested future agenda item, we would like, as the office of the general counsel, some guidance from the committee as to what happens invariably with one of the three of you would like a policy to go through the policy review committee.
Okay,
Number two is we wanted some guidance as we start to get policy recommendations, especially from non-administration sources. The PRC has asked for notice or reception of PRC PRC related recommendations 7 calendar days before the meeting, and then the Texas Open Meeting Act requires posting within 72 hours before the meeting. And so the question that arose in my office, Madam Chair, is what, if anything, would the committee like for us to do with agenda items that come after the 7 days, but before the 72 hours to post the agenda? And again, I don't know if that's something the committee will indulge now, or if you would like to do that at the next time, but I figured I would posit it now.
let's consider it a future agenda item and put it on the next meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And the third and final question, thank you, is throughout all of this, as we have been drafting the minutes, one of the recommendations from one of the lawyers in our office was whether the committee would like for us to draft procedures for the actual committee that the committee could then adopt similar in fashion to the committees of the entire board that led to the genesis of this committee.
Okay, since we're having this conversation under suggested future agenda items, let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And that is all for me.
Okay, any other
Madam
questions?
Chair,
Yes,
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
sure.
With regard to the statements that I made earlier about red line versions coming to us initially, regarding the source, what do we want to do with that item?
Do we want, well, okay, in our agenda, we're now on suggested future agenda items.
Right.
I have concerns about deviating from the posted agenda, but we can certainly add that as a topic of discussion at our next meeting and address it then. Would that be acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd recommend we take that as the first agenda item next time.
Sure,
So we can get our rules and everybody understands.
that makes perfect sense to me.
All right, thank you.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you all for your help. Okay,
Yes,
does
ma'am.
anyone else have any questions? Okay, we are adjourned at 2:48 p.m. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.